Thank you. Well, it's wonderful to be here this afternoon with you, and thank you for taking part of your Memorial Day weekend to be downstairs here in the theater to learn a little bit more about transitional ministry in MCC. Before I start, I'm going to ask if Cademan would come up and open us in prayer.
Spirit of the living God, we just ask that you would fall fresh on us today, that we would be able to have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, the hearts to feel your presence in us and among us as we work together to be this community. May every voice be heard. May every purpose and protocol be clear and presented in a way to support and undergird the ministry and the work of this church. And we ask all this in your many names. Amen.
Thank you, Cademan. I want to begin by reading a scripture from Isaiah that I think really speaks to churches in particular that are getting ready to go through a season of transition and change. And it's from Isaiah. Thus says God, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and what comes from it, who gives breath to the people upon it, and spirit to those who walk in it. I am God. I have called you in righteousness, and I have taken you by the hand and kept you. I have given you a covenant to the people. A light I have given you as a covenant to the people, a light to the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison those who sit in darkness. I am your God, and that is my name. My glory I give to no others, nor praise to idols. See, the former things have come to pass, and new things I now declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them. Sing to the Lord a new song. And that's part of what we'll be doing, is learning a new song together. You know, we may not know the words yet. We might not know the harmony. But eventually, we're all going to get it, and when we do, it'll be a beautiful song with you as the choir and God as the conductor. I want to just briefly say a thank you to the board of directors and the staff. No one signed on for this season of transition and the extra work that comes with it. And it's not as though they didn't have enough to do as it was. And this is really a stretch time for all of them. And so whether you agree with everything they've done or not, I would just ask that you would join me in thanking them for their service. So today's forum is really about pastoral transitions in MCC congregations, what we've learned, what we know, what we've seen over the years, that if we follow this process, that the process works. And so I'm going to go through this with you piece by piece, line by line. And I am not one that's in favor of reading everything in a PowerPoint, but today we're going to do that. The reason is I want to make sure everyone has the same information and that we have covered it all, and we are going to take the mystery out of this process so that everyone has a shared understanding and you will know how to pray for your church going forward. Okay? So this is focused about the transitions in ministry. That's the focus of this forum, and I'm going to ask that you please keep your questions relevant to that particular topic. I will try to keep us moving along, being mindful of the other service that's getting ready to start at 1:30. We may have a few Elmo moments. You know what those are? Enough, let's move on. Elmo? Okay. But we'll do that. And I appreciate all of us just being mindful of that. All right, so let's get started. And just to let you know that at any given time, almost 20 to 25% of our congregations in MCC are in transition at one phase or one place or another. So this is something that the Office of Church Life and Health really focuses on as one of our primary tasks, is helping congregations through these periods of transition. So what are the tasks of transition? Number one, it's to, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper into each one of these in the other slides, so I'm going to just click through these. Maintain forward movement in the church's ministry, manage the human dynamics, come to terms with history and understanding of current realities, build a clear sense of identity and purpose that is widely owned and shared, and build new commitment for directions in ministry. So let's talk about maintaining forward movement. This is not a time in the life for the church for everyone to take a step back. It really is a time for everyone to take a step up. Because you want to keep things moving forward. So you want to continue to offer quality worship, continue providing care for one another. That's what we do as a church. Providing care for others, all of the wonderful benevolence and compassionate work you do in your community, and then however your particular church is called to be a voice for justice and reconciliation and hope in the world. So we want to continue to maintain moving forward. This is not a time for going backwards. Number two, manage the human dynamics of transition. Wherever there are people, there are emotions. And throughout these times of transition, emotions generally run a little higher than usual. Two things are happening there. One is that there's some anxiety around the unknown. I mean, that's that, which is fairly normal. And then there is the sense of grief and loss that comes with a pastoral transition. And I will tell you that not everyone will be in the same place at the same time around these things. Everyone is going to be in different places. One day somebody's going to be sad, the next day they're going to be happy. I know when I left MCC San Diego after 10 years, there were some people there that were very sad, and they cried. And there were other people that came back to church after I left. So, and I'll tell you what's important, I think, in a community of faith is that we all respect wherever each person is. And that this is a safe space for us to appropriately express our emotions around the grief, loss, and change. Okay? We can do that. So you have the dynamic of grief, fear, the dynamic of control. Whenever there's a change and a vacuum comes, everything in the system will try to fill that vacuum. So it happens, and so part of our planning, with putting a gap in right away is, to try to avoid those kind of places where it gets filled in, where it may not be what you would fill it in with. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. That was a good no. And the dynamic of hope, that there is something beyond this and that you will get through this. And congregations can come out of these processes even stronger and better positioned for the future than they were going into it, no matter how strong they were before that. Okay, thank you. Come to terms with our history and understanding of our current realities. This is all part of facilitating a process of conflict identification, mediation, and management related to the relationships with the previous pastors. Believe me, it's all there, and part of what we do is help everyone to process this so that the congregation will be in the healthiest place possible to begin to move on, to embrace a new identity and a new future together. But if you're still holding on to the past, it's hard to let go and move into the future. Amen?
So let's get it out there. Let's talk about it. Let's get it out in the open. And once it's all out in the open, it loses its power over you. So we can do that, and our intentional interims are very experienced and trained in facilitating these kind of processes. As part of the interim process, there will be congregational it's forums where we'll take you through each of these steps and stages. So there'll be lots of opportunities for the congregation to be involved throughout the entire process. Okay? Yeah. And part of, the process of going through this pastoral transition is that you begin to gather information. You make an organizational analysis. Everyone has an opportunity to give input in terms of these surveys. They review all of the church documents. They do a demographic analysis. It's kind of, if you're familiar with strategic planning, it's almost kind of like a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, our threats? Where are we now? And then you will be looking at where is God calling you to the future. But this is a time where, the interim will be looking to you as a congregation to give your input. You're the ones that will help develop that criteria for the Pastoral Search Committee that will help inform them as to what you're looking for in your next senior pastor. Lead the congregation through a series of events to help build a clear sense of identity and purpose that is widely owned and shared. This is such a critical piece. And in many congregations, developing a new sense of identity takes a lot of time. If you've had, in a pastor-centered sized church, where you've had one pastor for 10 years, if you ask someone, tell us about your church, the first thing they do is tell you about the pastor. Now, I don't think that that's primarily the case here. I don't know. I could be wrong. But there is something about determining your identity as a congregation apart from Neil. So who are you? And it's just like Jesus said to the disciples, who do you say that I am? Right? And they all had different answers. What we want is that we will all have the same answer by the time we get through this process. But if you don't know who you are, it's very difficult then to be able to attract others and be able to tell others who you are also, right? And your identity, is probably, and these things change over time depending on the context, right? All right. So, and then that widely owned and widely shared and owned sense of identity and purpose, I think that as a pastor from the outside looking in, and I'm considering a congregation to apply to be their senior pastor, I want to know that this is in place. I want to know that they know who they are and where they're going. Because if I don't know that, how do I know I'm a match for them? Right? And vice versa. So this is really critical. And sometimes people say to me, well, how long does all this take? Well, the reality is it takes as long as it takes. and in some congregations, these things can go very quickly. At other times, the places you think that would go really quick bog down. The important part is to continue to work the process, continue to pray, and to treat each other with grace and love as you go through this. Okay? Build a commitment for new directions in ministry, then begin to select the Pastoral Search Committee, and generally the composition of the Pastoral Search Committee is laid out in the bylaws of your church. You agree on the pastoral search process. They continue to conduct congregational surveys and forums. There's recruiting of the candidate, the announcing of the candidate visits the church and the city, and then the congregation votes on the candidate. So one thing that's really important to emphasize is that in MCC, when it comes to the settled pastor, senior pastor, the congregation always makes that decision. That is always in the hands of the body. With the interim, it's an appointment by the Office of Church Life and Health in consultation with the local board of directors. And the Office of Church Life and Health provides support and supervision for the intentional interim throughout the entire time they're there. Okay? So here's back to the timeline a little bit. 12 to 18 months is the average. And some people will say, is there anything average about MCC? I don't know. You know, that's it's like, yeah, so. And so these are just some basic guidelines to begin to look at. And like I said, it can go much quicker, or it can get bogged down. It just depends. You know, we can't control the external context either, can we? You know, and so if there's a crisis, if there was an earthquake, there was something that happened in the city, you know, all of these things are going to slow down because you're a church. You're going to stop and pay attention to those things. And so, you know, we're going to keep continuing through the intentional interim process as best we can. All right? And so here's the transition partners. You know, we have the local church, we have MCC, and the interim pastor, and we're all interrelated and working together in this. We work closely with the board of directors. MCC, Office of Church Life and Health, also provides support for the pastoral search committee from the time it forms until the time it is ready to call a settled pastor. And we have different people that help you, assist you with that. The intentional interim, 12 to 14 months, 12 to 24 months, is an interventionist, not merely a worship leader. So let's talk about that just a little bit. You know, whereas they are here to continue to do the pastoral duties, like we said, to do those maintenance tasks, to continue for that forward momentum. But they also have some very intentional tasks that they have to take the congregation through. And that takes work too. So really, they almost like have two jobs in one. I get an amen to that, Noah Nana? Yeah. So, so they're facilitating the transition process. They're experienced with particular skills. All of our intentional interims are trained by MCC, have gone through our intentional interim training, and we have monthly calls with them, and like I said, ongoing support and supervision. All right, and so in our bylaws, this is the role of the pastor in MCC. Clergy person, licensed to practice, responsible for the duties of teacher, preacher, and a spiritual leader. And so these are also the duties of the intentional interim. They have the same pastoral duties. Roles and responsibilities. This is really important that everyone be clear about their roles and responsibilities through a time of transition. One, the board of directors assures continuity of leadership, administrative policy, and legal and fiscal viability. Continues all of its routine fiduciary functions, and works with the Office of Church Life and Health to assure sufficient interim pastoral leadership, including a clear job description and contract, assures the continuing financial vitality of the congregation, and addresses the additional financial needs of transition. So the board has all of their regular duties to do and other duties as assigned. The staff assures the continuity of congregational life and in ministries, including administration of the church. They continue in their respective individual ministries and roles and responsibilities under the supervision of the interim pastor. So the interim pastor will be the supervisor will be the head of staff. Provide spiritual leadership and continue to facilitate intercessory prayer for the Pastoral Search Committee and all of those working on this process of transition. So, the staff, also be very clear about their role, the board's clear about their role, the intentional interim's clear about their role, and the congregation has the big responsibility of participating in the process. The Office of Church Life and Health provides guidance, support, and direction in the overall process of transition. We appoint the interim pastor in consultation with the board of directors. We consult with and coach the board, pastoral search committee, and interim pastor throughout the process. We are with you from the start to the very end. We also consult with the pastoral search committee regarding prospective candidates for pastor. Now we're going to go through the pastoral search process, kind of piece by piece here. The Pastoral Search Committee presents a qualified candidate to the congregation for election as pastor at a congregational meeting. Determines how it will approach the task, creates and adopts a process and timeline to complete its work, develops guiding policies and writing for how the committee will work together, develop and implements a plan for engaging the congregation in the process and communicating with the congregation. And consults with the Office of Church Life and Health and staff throughout the process. This is what we suggest. This is our suggested makeup of a pastoral search committee. However, you have to look at your local bylaws and see. They may be the same, they may be a little bit different, but 3 members of the board and 4 members elected at a congregational meeting. Do you have a question?
Yeah, question. So this is a recommendation in terms of the composition to have members of the board plus members of the congregation. However, I realize that that's not our size. That's the recommendation in general or for regardless of church size?
Regardless of church size.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think part of it is the dynamics of having more people on the pastoral search committee and its ability then to really function healthily and effectively as a committee.
So given that you're recommending this size for, if that's the recommendation, through our current bylaws say 9 persons elected by the congregation. If the recommendation is to this, then the board would have to bring to the congregation for our October congregation meeting to amend it to reflect this?
Correct. If that was the direction the board wanted to go. Like I said, and as you know, the local bylaws, that's what I said, you have to look at them and refer to them and, make a decision. Is this the way we want to go or do we want to do it differently? But this is our recommendation. This is an effective number of people in terms of group dynamics. You have lots of issues around confidentiality. You have people that have to be available for a lot of meetings, sometimes on short notice. So the more people you get, the harder that process is to work and manage. And so we have found that this is probably around an ideal number if possible, if it works out. All discussions and deliberations occur when the Pastoral Search Committee is meeting together either face-to-face or electronically. Members of the Pastoral Search Committee do not discuss Pastoral Search Committee matters between themselves or in small groups of members of the Pastoral Search Committee. In other words, when the Pastoral Search Committee is together, that's when they're discussing pastoral search. They're not having meetings outside of the meetings. Members of the Pastoral Search Committee do not discuss Pastoral Search Committee matters through email. We found that too often those can get accidentally forwarded or sent somewhere that they shouldn't go and create all kinds of problems. Members of the Board of Directors do not discuss matters related to the Pastoral Search Committee when the board is meeting either in open or executive session. Pastoral Search Committee can make regular reports to the Board of Directors. And that can be part of, one of the members of the board that happens to be on the Pastoral Search Committee. In some places we've seen where the entire Board of Directors is on the Pastoral Search Committee, and I can tell you that is unfair to the Board of Directors. They have too much other responsibility and things to take care of to have all of your board members be in there and be responsible for it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yes?
When the pastoral search committee reports to the board during the process, is that an open session or executive session?
That'd be an open session. Yeah, it's just a report, here's where we are in the process, okay? But it's not discussing what's going on in the Pastoral Search Committee. It's more of a, here's where we are, here's what's happening. Does that make sense? Okay.
Because the pastoral search committee does not share the names of any of the applicants' candidates, even with the board of directors.
Correct. The entire Pastoral Search Committee selects the chair of the Pastoral Search Committee. So it's not automatically the vice moderator of the board if the vice moderator is on there. It's the Pastoral Search Committee makes their own determination of who's going to be the chair for the Pastoral Search Committee. The chair is the person that guides the process, serves as the representative and spokesperson for the Pastoral Search Committee, and ensures transparency of process while maintaining appropriate confidentiality of content. Really important. Transparency of process while maintaining appropriate confidentiality of content. You good with that? Okay. Transparency of the process means the congregation has a right to know what the process is, how to participate in the process, and what progress is being made in the process. Confidentiality of content means the congregation may not know who has applied for the position, the number of applications that have been received, the opinion held by the Pastoral Search Committee or any Pastoral Search Committee member regarding any applicant or any information regarding of any of the applicants. Well, you know what? It's really interesting because that question always comes up, and I've heard lots of different answers for it. But the reality is, if you know what does knowing the number really help? I think that it can also raise anxiety around, what's happening. I mean, you're really and ultimately looking for one qualified candidate. And so, somebody that says, well, I heard they only had 2 or 3, then they say, well, why aren't people interested in us? It lends itself to speculation. I'm not sure what the value is in actually sharing it. And so, we've just found that it's easier and simple just to keep it clean there. The confidentiality is just so critical because, applicants are often already, they're currently employed at another church. And so, any kind of breach of confidentiality could do just irreparable harm not only to the pastor, but to the congregation that finds out afterwards, after the fact that their pastor's looking at it, So we do our best to do what we can to protect everyone in terms of confidentiality throughout that process. The chair should be the person that initiates and receives communication from the congregation regarding matters of the Pastoral Search Committee and its process. The chair should be the person to initiate and receive communication with prospective candidates for the office of pastor. One person is the primary person that will make those contacts. The chair will also be the primary contact between OCLH staff and the Pastoral Search Committee. All deliberations of the Pastoral Search Committee are strictly confidential. Members of the Pastoral Search Committee should not disclose the discussion, deliberations, or processes of the Pastoral Search Committee with anyone outside the committee, except OCLH staff and others, as jointly determined by OCLH staff and chair. The members of the Pastoral Search Committee will hold one another accountable for such confidentiality and will remove from the Pastoral Search Committee any members who breaches this confidentiality. It should not be the sole responsibility of the chair of the Pastoral Search Committee to uphold, those guidelines around confidentiality. We're all in this together, and they should all help in terms of helping that norm be enforced around confidentiality. Yeah, well, it's happened, of course, and healthy pastoral search committees will deal with it appropriately and quickly, and that will usually mean the removal of that pastoral search committee member. Depends on how far you are along in the process to bring somebody new in at that point. That would be my counsel on that.
One thing for me, I've experienced a couple before because I've got one when I was in Kansas, a church boss where I was in Washington, D.C. with my MCC up there. A relative of mine gave me all the information. I never said anything, but she was breaching the confidentiality when she was part of a search committee. I never wanted to hear it. And I was going to blow the door on them, and I said, no, I just kept my mouth shut. But I like how this thing sets up, because for me, if I became a person, I will say nothing because I can call the HIPAA law.
Yeah. Okay. So we got this one? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Can we elect alternates to the pastoral search committee to take the place of somebody?
I think that would, you have to look at your bylaws around that. Again, the Pastoral Search Committee develops a budget for its work and submits the budget to the Board of Directors for approval. And so, this just lists some of the things. There is a cost to the pastoral search process. And we have to make sure that it's appropriately funded in order to really do an excellent process, which you want. Make sense? Okay. That's it. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boom. All right. Yes, sir. Well, there's a couple different ways. You're talking about how do we recruit candidates? Well, generally speaking, they come from within MCC. There are occasions when somebody feels compelled to want to transfer their credentials from another denomination to be part of MCC, and sometimes those candidates have been considered. They come from churches where often where their pastor is currently employed. Or sometimes it's staff clergy that are making a move to senior pastor. But I would say again, it's primarily within the MCC ranks of clergy. Okay.
What's the OCLH's point of view
On
on pastoral coaching?
pastoral poaching, well, yeah, well, I think that really it comes down to a sense of calling for that particular individual pastor. And generally speaking, if they're in a place where they're thinking about, am I still in my right place? Is this maybe God calling me somewhere else? I think that it's up for them to make that kind of prayerful discernment. And so in my sense, asking them if they may be interested I think is okay, quite honestly. Because really, and sometimes it's just a compliment to that pastor that you've done that. But truthfully, it does, again, push them to say, is God possibly calling me to do something different at this time in the life of my ministry? And oftentimes it's not. No, I know I'm in my right place. There's no strict rules around that. I think that just as long as it's done with integrity and honoring whatever that answer response is from the person that you've made the inquiry to. Okay. Yes.
Perhaps this is an unusual question. What happens if the pastoral search committee brings in a candidate? That candidate is being not accepted by the congregation. Does that same committee continue to search for a second candidate, or do we get a new pastoral search committee?
That's a good question. Whenever it's a good question, when you say a good question like that, the question's generally better than the answer. But I would say, I would have to look at the bylaws. And I think I would have to take the temperature of the current pastoral search committee. Are they tired? Do they need some new blood? Do they need some refreshing? I think it may depend on how exhaustive the process was. And it may really be up to some real discernment with the board of directors and the congregation as to whether to engage a whole new pastoral search committee. Because it may be that there were several candidates and they were really torn about which one to present, and so, they could have someone who may have been a backup that may all of a sudden be just the person that the congregation embraces. So in that case, I would say, it would be it would take an inordinate amount of time to reform a new pastoral search committee and take them all the way through the process when, in fact, this former committee had done all of this work and may have indeed have somebody else to present. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Does the pastoral search committee bring one candidate?
Yes. Only one candidate. And you can imagine that if, let's say we brought 2 candidates forward, and the church was 60-40 split. What do you do, and how do you start your ministry in a congregation with those kind of percentages? How do you do it? How do you function? How does the church function? That's why we present only one candidate. We give them the opportunity. It's, and it's a sense of calling, and it's a spiritual discernment process for the congregation. They prayerfully discern, is this the person that God has called here? And so if the congregation decides that is not, as she brought up, then you're back to the drawing board. Yes?
How often does that happen?
Very, very rarely. Very rarely. Yeah. It's a rare occurrence. I mean, not to say.
We used to do that, have multiple candidates. Some of them was really hard.
And that the clergy banded together one clergy conference. And said we would not run against each other.
My question was how often has a candidate been presented and not let go? That's what I was asking.
Okay.
And that's pretty much.
I'm going to rein us back in because I have a question up here in front. Yes. If the candidate's not a Christian, well, I would say that if they're going to be a candidate for a pastor in MCC, they have to meet our criteria for of what it means to be a pastor, credentialed clergy in MCC. Pardon me? Well, I mean, you have, if you're going to be an MCC pastor, you've gone through, MCC processes. And so, I would say that this would be a very clear that they would be Christian. Is that helpful? Okay. Christian's a big tent. Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. All right, folks. Well, I hope this was helpful, and I just want to say is that, we're going to make sure that these PowerPoints are available to other people that weren't here. So if you hear people asking and have questions about the process, please encourage them to see Cademan and get a copy of the PowerPoint, okay? God bless you, and know that God is with you every step of the way through this transition.